America's longest war is going to get even longer. The U.S. delaying its troop drawdown in Afghanistan. We will talk about the military strategy with our top analyst and the politics of it all with our political panel. And Vice President Joe Biden still hasn't decided whether to get in or out, to jump into the presidential race or stand aside. Why Hillary Clinton's strong debate performance could be making that decision even trickier. Then, the former Assembly Speaker is about to speak out. Why Shelley Silver's upcoming trial has got a whole lot of folks in Albany nervous. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, this morning, as many of you may have seen, President Obama announced that the U.S. is reversing course and keeping thousands of American troops in Afghanistan beyond the original timelines.
President Obama today explained his shifting timeline in Afghanistan.
I believe this mission is vital to our national security interests.
Nearly all of the 9,800 U.S. troops currently in Afghanistan were supposed to be home by the end of 2016. But President Obama will now leave as many as 5,500 troops on the ground. It's a remarkable turn for the president, but today he said that while the U.S. presence in Afghanistan will continue longer than he planned, it will be a narrow mission. Counterterrorism operations and training and assisting Afghan forces.
I do not send you into harm's way lightly. It's the most solemn decision that I make.
But why the shift in policy? Top Pentagon officials believed Afghan forces weren't ready to operate on their own, and there's been a recent surge in violence by the Taliban and now ISIS. Last month, Taliban fighters took control of a key northern city. Afghan forces battled back in Kunduz with support from U.S. airstrikes, but one strike was catastrophic. A hospital was hit, leaving 22 people dead, including 12 staffers from Doctors Without Borders.
We would never intentionally target a protected medical facility.
President Obama insisted this decision is not disappointing, and while it won't be the last time policy adjustments are made,
the cessation of our combat role has not changed.
All right, let's bring in our panel. Richard Brodsky is a former Democratic New York State Assemblyman, now a senior fellow at Demos and a professor at NYU. And Dominic Carter, of course, here, political journalist and author as always. To my right, Mike Lyons, military analyst, retired captain in the U.S. Army who served in Iraq. We got Republican strategist Bill O'Reilly, the good one, with us, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. All right, let's just jump right into it. 14 years later, Mike, and we're still there. I've heard it argued that the situation on the ground right now in Afghanistan is as bad as it's been since 2001. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, it probably is, because the Afghan security forces still don't have the confidence in order to take the fight to the enemy, to the Taliban. By attacking Kunduz a few weeks ago there, they extend their supply lines. They show great competency from their perspective. They destroy the town. They get in, destroy infrastructure. That would have been the test. I think had the Afghan security forces been able to take care of that, you might have seen a different result today. Also, in the shadow is ISIS. I think that's something that the president has to be concerned about going on to Afghanistan. So I think he did the right thing. I think most in the military would say that not only will this provide the military force there, but it's going to provide a psychological boost to the Afghan security forces, as well as help the political situation there. It's a country that wants us to be there, and again, I think the president did the right thing today.
We'll get into a second about the politics and what it may or may not do, but specifically the plan was we were going to pull back to like 1,000 troops that we're going to keep basically in Kabul at the U.S. Embassy. Now, as I understand, and you correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to have a presence at the Bagram Air Force Base. We're going to be in Jalalabad, and we're also going to be, I guess, in Kandahar. And that's where 50-some-odd 100 American troops are going to be, plus whatever international presence there is. What's the significance of getting outside of Kabul and going to those three places?
Well, I think, first of all, some of those training slots that you saw on the film there could be more or less of trainers and consultants, so to speak, not necessarily people in uniform. This is going to turn into a counter-terrorist mission. I think you'll see more Green Berets, which is why they're going back to Kandahar, knowing that's a stronghold for the Taliban, and that's why they have to, again, bring the fight to the enemy down there along with those Afghan security forces. I think, again, the president looked at the situation, and as much as it pained him, I'm sure, to come to this conclusion, He needed to make it right now because we're 14 months out of drawing down about 10,000 troops. The Army said, look, we got to know now because we're going to start attriting those troops starting on the first of the year, making those plans. Now he makes a decision. They could look over the horizon and plan for past 2016.
Is this more an indictment, what the president had to say today, on the Afghan security forces? By all accounts, they have not acquitted themselves very well. And even when we went in, we had to basically throw the whole kitchen sink to get them to where they got to.
Yeah.
Or is it more of an indictment that the administration had a rosy projection of where this country would be? We just train these folks here, we give them the template, we say we're getting out here, and they'll get their act together.
Not a lot of cases in history where an army had been rebuilt really from 0 to 350,000 soldiers, especially in a country like Afghanistan that has just so much illiteracy, getting them to learn these complicated weapon systems that we have. In fact, it's forced us to buy kind of dumbed down technology for the Afghan security forces so they could work it. I've read articles about just getting them to understand the complexity of some of our systems. For example, helicopters. They can't fly our US-based helicopters. We've had to bring in behind the European-based helicopters, which are easier to fly. So you take a country that's a high illiteracy rate, that's very difficult to learn. It was a very large task to begin with to train 350,000 soldiers.
We'll get to the American politics with the guys at the table in a second, but we were burned by Karzai. Okay, I mean, this guy, whatever you want to call him, that's being generous, given what we did. We any more confident that Ghani's the right guy? Apparently, he's come across well to both leadership in Washington and also the military commanders on the ground. He seems to want to do the right thing here. We've heard that story before. Why should we have faith in the Afghan leadership?
You know, I think it's instinct that people feel about him. General Campbell, for example, who's, put his career on hold to go there to lead that process up. He showed up in Washington back in March, and Ghani did, and looked for that support back then. This has really been going on since then. There's been no sign. He's definitely pro-American with regard to the security situation there. He understands that in order to have any kind of political success, he's got to have a secure environment. Okay,
and last thing for me, and the guys can jump in. We've talked before about whether it's mission creep or whatever else. What is the mission? We push it back a year, okay? At the end of is it just to say, all right, whoever's going to succeed me in the White House, I'm not giving them, a cluster F when they walk in the front door. At least we'll preserve some modicum here of sanity on the ground with some presence, and then they can figure out where they're going to go next. Is that it? Or what is the goal that next year, realistically, Mike, the end of next year, we can hope the situation on the ground realistically could be achieved?
Well, you could argue that the 5,500 is actually too low to begin with. But what it is it's that floor that should the next administration come in and based on their analysis or the situation on the ground want to increase it, it's a better jump-off point than only having 1,000 troops, which is, we really weren't troops, they were Marines and embassies and the like. So at least the president is leaving behind an infrastructure there. I think that's really what that's what he really got out of this. Didn't bring a lot of firepower. That's not going to be the case. I'm not saying he's throwing it over to the next administration, but he's at least giving the next administration a chance to make its decision on what it wants to do in Afghanistan.
Quick military question. The training of Afghan soldiers not going particularly well. The training of Syrian soldiers to fight Assad not going well. The training of Iraqi soldiers not going well. Is the whole notion of training other people's soldiers not something that we should be pursuing? It doesn't seem like it works very often.
It's cultural in some ways because it has worked before. It worked in Vietnam. It worked in certain areas there. It really gets back to the population that you're dealing with. And in these cases, first of all, there's got to be a will to fight. That's difficult to train up into somebody. They have to want to fight. Look at part of the issue inside of Syria. Look at all the men that are refugees that are leaving the country. They just don't want to fight for their countries. You can't make somebody do that. But I think this illiteracy issue is key, and the kind of the world we live in and the technology we have is just so far ahead of what the world is, to the point where I read a story about they gave an electrical bicycle pump or air pump to an Afghan soldier. He couldn't figure out how to use it because they weren't using a standard bicycle pump to blow up a basketball. That kind of compressor is normal for us here in the United States, but they can't even get their head around the fact that this machine compresses air that I could fill up this basketball with. So I think that is the real issue, is the illiteracy of the people.
Obviously, this doesn't happen in a vacuum, guys. We're already in election mode. how does, start on the Democratic side, how did the Democrats say this was an administration whose point was, I'm going to get you out of these wars, and now they're going to continue, not in huge numbers, but still in more of a presence than was originally thought. From a Democratic side, can the party get behind
Well,
this?
if you're talking about politics alone, he got us almost out. And I think the American people, given what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam, with all due respect, the notion that we successfully created the South Korean state does not comport with history. There just is no example of an outside power coming in and doing, as Andrew said, any of the things that we've set out to do. The president's problem was he had to find a way out, and he almost did. Politically, I don't think it's going to hurt him. Frankly, not only with Democrats, but with independents and with that small percentage of Republicans who aren't smackdown Obama haters.
But the next president and the next nominee staying on the Dems has to answer the question, Dominic, so what's the goal? You walk in, are you going to keep the troops there or you're not? Like, nobody thought we were going to leave an unguarded embassy, so everybody was copacetic with 1,000, but 50-something, 100, as Mike says, can lead to more. It can lead to another surge. It can lead to who knows what else. Situation degenerates even further on the ground. They're going to have to now answer that question. I don't think this is what candidates, or whoever the Democrat, wanted to answer. They wanted to say, last president got us out of what the one before him got us into. Now it's more complicated. And frankly, it is a complicated situation, but they have to have a complicated answer.
It's interesting, Richard, because the hand that Obama was dealt is almost the hand now that he's going to leave the next person coming in. And so the question that I have as it relates to all this, and maybe Mike can answer this for me, is simple. Is it also a matter, because I believe most Americans care about pocketbook issues here and major issues here, but is it also a matter if the U.S. pulls out, you're going to have ISIS and other groups move right in. So whether we want to deal with this as an issue or not, it's very important to us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we already have 4 failed states in the Middle East, and this would be a 5th. I mean, we have to understand foreign policy is important, and that hurts our allies, that hurts our friends abroad. So we do have to deal with it. The president, he holds his nose when he wants to deal with Syria to begin with already. So I think this is a good example of we just have to face the music on it.
Do Republicans double down on this? I know it's been a comedy show to this point with Trump, and he's going to make it a parking lot and all the rest. But that said, do they say, see, we told you? Now you got to double down?
I think they have to, and I hope they give the president some credit for being responsible here. I mean, it has to kill President Obama not to be able to finish his term saying they're all out. But you couldn't just hand the country over to the Taliban. And that's probably what was going to happen if we had pulled out. I think the really sad thing, you talk about the presidential election and how this may affect it, is I think so many Americans, including a lot of the news media, has forgotten the troops in Afghanistan. I mean, they've forgotten it. And if I'm going to be political, I would say as soon as it became Obama's war, they didn't talk about it anymore. The Code Pinks were all under Bush, but I won't go there. But they've almost forgotten it, and I think that's a really sad thing. But I do applaud the president for doing this. I know it wasn't what he probably wanted to do, but it has to be done. I mean, Mike is exactly right. Obviously, he's trained in this, but you have 4 failed states. You can't afford a 5th, especially a pivotal one like Afghanistan that's so centrally located.
I think that lack of interest from the American public that Bill was referring to sort of leads to a weird political soft spot, because I think he's right, and a lot of voters aren't paying a lot of attention to it, so I don't think it's going to register that much with regular voters. Democrats, it'll give them a chance to run against the White House and say, either we support the move, or he should have done more earlier, or he should never have gotten us out, and show that they're a little tougher than they otherwise might be. Republicans are going to have to agree with the move, because they've been saying that the president hasn't been responsive enough on Afghanistan as well as other areas, so they can criticize him for not taking action sooner. But at the end of the day, they have to agree with the decision overall.
And you know why there's a fatigue, Mike? I don't think the American public, and I don't think anybody really knows, frankly, but they don't know what happens when we're completely gone. I mean, there's this sense you're not going to win. At the end of the day, Iraq, at best, we're going to do a Band-Aid on the thing. Maybe of all people, Biden was right in the beginning. You divide the thing up into 3 different parts here. Who knows? But the point is, I think America doesn't want to be half pregnant on this. They want to keep just enough there. They don't think you're really going to change a part of the world here that we have so underestimated the complexities of. But I think they're also scared if we're completely out, what happens next?
Right, and Afghanistan historically has been the graveyard of empires, and I think That's why I think the president's responsible for leaving what he's leaving there with the approval of the Afghan government. He always had said, Afghan good war, Iraq bad war. He ran on that back in 2008. And I think, given the fact that they can at least keep it from tipping back over to the Taliban, keep ISIS out, that's got to be a plus until the Afghan government can change the underpinnings of the real challenges they have in that country.
Mike, can I ask you about ISIS and the Taliban? Are they competitors, or will they work together?
No, they're competitors. They're not going to work together. But what they have is open space. Afghanistan, the country, is a few cities around a very big ring road. Natural gas, lots of rare earth minerals that are there that the Chinese are actually trying to move in on. We've got to bring commerce. That's been this whole issue here. If you can bring commerce to that country with gas pipelines from Russia through it, it gives the country a chance to, kind of up its game when it comes to its technology. Until that happens, until the environment's secure, it's never going to happen.
Mike, as always, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right, and we want to get you involved in our conversation as well. So head over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on our question. And here it is tonight. President Obama keeping troops in Afghanistan, a necessity or, frankly, a political flip-flop? What do you folks have to say? Again, keep the comments coming. When we come back, we will switch gears to politics stateside. Will he or won't he? Joe Biden still hasn't made up his mind whether to run. Now he's getting pressure to decide from an unlikely source.